Yes, ma'am.
I have a very long commute every morning, and there's one podcast that I enjoy listening to that keeps me going, and it just marvels me it amazes me, I should say, what my peers are doing throughout the country. And the way that I'm able to learn that is through Amy Herman's podcast, the School Librarian United podcast, which is on all the podcasting platforms, if I'm not mistaken. So anytime I run across a brand new newbie librarian, I'm like, listen, you need to start listening to this podcast. And what are you in, season 7 now, or 7 or 8?
Hey, Casey. I am starting season 7
Yeah,
next month.
yeah. So hey, it's a lot of good content from past years. So catch up, y'all. Let me shut up. Y'all enjoy Amy Hermit. Come on in and take it away, hon.
Hey, everybody. My name is Amy Herman, and Casey's absolutely right. We have been crossing paths for a long time. Thanks to Twitter, we can date our friendship. I did put a link in the show note already to this presentation, and I've also uploaded it to the resource that Casey's going to share out on Sunday. But it's really great to see everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. If we haven't met, I am a school librarian by day and a podcaster for the rest of my life. And I've been doing this since 2018. I will be starting season 7 very soon, in August. I am in Metro Detroit, and that is my home base. And I've been here for all my adult life and most of my childhood. So I've been a podcaster now since 2018, and I created this purely out of selfish reasons because I was so incredibly lost and unfulfilled in work. And I couldn't quit my job. But I am very, very grateful for the listening community that has evolved. The closest, dearest friends I have in my entire life, I can attribute to being a podcaster. And I hope that it helps you in ways that provide community and a resource and a way to feel supported when you are sometimes like me. I'm the only person in my district who does what I do. And if I want to see another school librarian or talk with them, I either have to get in a car or get on a plane because there aren't any near me. All right. Let's see. I want to thank Casey Boyd. Casey and I, again, were crossing paths very early in my journey. And I want to say a little something about her because she said yes when quite a few people wouldn't have even considered being on my show. My first season was a solo effort, a little cringy because I didn't have the tech savvy to have guests on my show. So season 2, and Casey and I, she really did. This really means so much to me because when I had a need for a guest, I could go to Casey, and she was incredibly supportive. And I'll tell you one thing that this PD is missing is spotlighting Casey and giving her the time to speak and really broadcast all the joy and passion that she has for our profession. But I selfishly got to do that. I press record and everybody can listen to it. Her episodes are so incredibly important to me for many reasons. So friends, I'll tell you what this presentation isn't. And that is how to be a podcaster. I get lots of requests. Oh, you're a podcaster? Tell me how you're podcasting with your students. I'm not. I will tell you though, I have corralled all of that information. I've curated all this information. There is a presentation within a presentation, very meta. And so, if you're at all interested in doing this with your students, if you're at all interested in doing this personally, because I do have friends who've been on the show who are also podcasters, what I have done is taken everything that has ever crossed my path when it comes to being a podcaster or organizing student podcasting and put it this in this presentation. The link is within the presentation. And I know, speaking to you, there are some of you for whom you have never listened to a podcast. And then there are some of you like me who listen to podcasts every day. My podcast listening begins with my dog walk, which is oftentimes before 6 a.m. So it is something that I have had a very, it's a very, been a very important part of my information diet on a daily basis. And it really has transformed how I look at information. So, first of all, why listen to podcasts in the first place? Well, in no particular order, and I am flying through this, I apologize. But let's face it, you're going to, first of all, it's free. It's free, 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 and it's on demand. Streaming before that was a thing. So, I started listening to podcasts almost 10 years ago. And it was something that I could do whenever I needed to have something to keep me entertained, and I was very grateful for it. But I'll tell you what you're also going to get is authenticity. You're going to get authenticity, and that is especially true when you listen to podcasts that are created for and by school librarians. Another reason why I really love podcasting is because it is a repository of episodes. They don't disappear much in the same way that you would stream Netflix. You can stream and binge listen to podcasts, and it's discreet. Nobody knows what you're listening to. It could be garbage, it could be something that transforms your profession. So I love that because it is a way for you to build knowledge and confidence moving forward in something that you're doing without having the physical supports that traditional teachers have. If a traditional teacher in a classroom wants to do something they've never done before, trust me, all they have to do is stand outside in the hall when the kids are getting ready for dismissal, look left, look right. They are physically surrounded by people who do what they do every day. If I look left, right, nobody's there because we are isolated in so much that there is typically not another school librarian on hand in the building. Whereas subject level teachers and grade level teachers are physically corralled and put into a space where they are within stone's throw of their colleagues. And that is best practice. That doesn't apply to us. So I've relied on podcasts as a way to help me support what I do remotely. It is my instant PLN. I have created a very vibrant PLN full of professionals who are willing to share their expertise. And we were pandemic proof. So this started in 2018. So when the pandemic hit, we were off to the races. And there were some of my best work, I think, most important work that we did together as a podcast was done during the pandemic when when the conferences were canceled. And when the conferences were canceled, we were able to podcast. It just continued. I was so grateful to those who stepped up to do podcast relate pandemic related podcast episodes at a time when all the conferences were canceled. So this has really been important to me. All right. So, how do you listen to a podcast? So, friends, it's fun. I'll go to a conference and somebody will just give me their phone and say, I don't understand. How do you listen to a podcast? Well, first of all, factory installed, all of our phones, our smartphones come with factory installed apps. You don't have to do a darn thing. Somebody said to me, I'm not adding one more thing to my phone. Good news. You don't have to, it's already there. So, all of our smartphones come with factory installed apps. And you never have to pay for one. I know, I don't. I've never paid for a podcast app, but you can also listen on the website. And all podcasts are also web based. So if you happen to be on a desktop or laptop computer, go for it. When you listen to a podcast, I liken it to Netflix because it's very similar in such that you've got seasons and you've got episodes. And if you're like me, you might decide to try something and then abandon it, or try something and binge it. And when we talk about the things that we listen to, we always talk to our friends and say, "Oh my God, did you listen to this?" And you're like, "Yes." All right. So, friends, getting to the core of our conversation today, how do we use this for professional development? So I have the benefit of talking to many districts and state organizations to know that this has been done successfully by a multitude of groups and organizations, and that is using podcasts as the core content for your development, your professional development. And the key here is that it is free. And that is huge because if you're like me, there is zero money allocated for professional development for school librarians. I have always been grouped in with the ELA team. I've been grouped in with the specials team. Okay, the only thing I have in common with the gym teacher, art teacher, music teacher, and perhaps, I don't know, I mean, is the fact that we share the same students. That's it. So I want PD that speaks to my needs. So informally versus formal PD. Informally is stuff we do on our own because it is gratifying, because it seeks to support a need that we have. In many cases, we have goals and objectives that we set for ourselves. I know when I was a 14-year school librarian, I worked at the elementary library, and I wanted very much for a change in my career. And so I interviewed and I selfishly interviewed a bunch of high school librarians. I was like, sweet. So I took that information and went to that job interview and I absolutely nailed that interview. Not because I had ever been a high school librarian, but because I had learned from high school librarians who had been on my show and used those resources as a way to sort of bolster whatever confidence I had going into an interview. Um, and also documenting, I have librarians who have said to me, actually, Amy, I talked to my principal and they said that for my PD, which is part of my professional growth as a librarian, my principal is letting me document the 5 episodes and how I'm going to implement that into my space. And I was like, that's amazing. Because for a principal to say, I'm going to give you that agency, I'm going to give you that ability to choose what you want to focus on. And because you, as the expert in that space, know what you need to focus on. So it can be very informal like that. Um, it can also be formal. And I have talked to school library leaders in California, New Hampshire, Texas, New York, and Georgia about how they have used the podcast for like their summer programming or they have actually acquired the ability to honor state certification continuing education credits, and they have done so by talking to their state organizations which confer those continuing education credits on our certification boards. You know what I'm saying? And in this case, they were giving their members, say, hey, here is the podcast. Pick 5 episodes. You're going to go on something like Flip, or you're going to go onto a Google form after you've listened to the episode, and you're going to document how is this going to support best practice in your space moving forward. And the wonderful thing is it allowed each of those members to look at the offerings on the podcast and choose the things that best supported their needs. And that was really gratifying because, like I said, the yes is always the answer. When these states come to me, when a district coordinator says, hey, Amy, can we use your podcast for PD? The answer is always yes. When I get requests from instructors and people who work at the collegiate level, working with pre-service school librarians, the answer is always yes. Oftentimes, I'll hear from listeners who say, "Yeah, I had to listen to your podcast." And they say, "I had to listen to your podcast? Come on. I listened to your podcast for an assignment." That's awesome. Sometimes I'll hear, "Oh, well, I actually cited your podcast in an assignment." It is more and more increasingly being seen as a way to create at least background information. So when you're doing research, listening to a podcast may contribute to your background information before you move into a particular area of interest. But I have had graduate students and their instructors say, "Hey, is it okay if we put this in our syllabus?" And the answer is, of course, always yes. Using episodes allows us to delve more into. Oh, let me go backwards. Because oftentimes we might be looking at something specific that we're looking to drill down into, something that we want to investigate on a deeper level, and talk to school librarians who have excelled, who are award-winning individuals in these particular areas. And I've been really fortunate to be able to interview a lot of incredibly generous leaders in our profession who then share their resources with us in the show notes. So let me show you what that looks like. Also, District Day of Learning. I know my school year is starting with a day of learning. They call it Launch into Learning. I don't know what you all call it, but and this is a really, I think it's a really effective way to use the talent that is in your district, and that is offering a day of learning when peers teach one another. And so I'll offer a couple sessions that I'll teach, and this day of learning is held before the students return to school. And the day of learning is a lot of fun, but I have heard of districts which have offered, for like a PD or an in-service day, rather than bringing in an expert, rather than bringing in somebody from what will we call the outside. You know what I'm saying? Like I absolutely cannot stand when my district shells out a lot of money to bring in some nobody to come and talk to us about something that may or likely may not have much to do with what I do in my space on a daily basis. There are school districts that have used podcasts, and it's clever. I would love to do this, but basically you bring your in this case you bring your walking shoes or your running shoes to the track, and during your PD you're asked to, for the next say hour and a half, listen to a podcast, and an educational related podcast that speaks to your needs, and we'll document that and give you PD hours for this year. Huge, absolutely huge. I would love to be able to do that, and there are some districts that are like, "Yep, you know what? If you can, find," and they actually offer like a menu of episodes and podcasts that would maybe speak to the different areas, of instruction. My first season, I got a wild Facebook message like, "Hey, Amy, I listened to your podcast. My district will give us PD credit. Do you have a certificate?" And it was during the lunch. I was doing lunch duty. I was with my principal. I'm like, "Dude, somebody's listening to my podcast and they get PD credit for listening to it." It was like very humbling. And so I said, "Well, listen, give me about 5 minutes. I'll make a certificate. And this is amateur hour. But friends, it does not take much to document your time spent listening to podcasts. And it is something that more and more people are recognizing as legitimate research that we can do to more round our education. So, by the way, APA and MLA and Chicago has formats for citing podcasts. And that just to me is incredibly validating because it is perceived as something that places value on what I do. And I'm very grateful. So, for example, if you need to build a reading culture, there are all sorts of ways to do that. All right, friends, if you are interested in building out your collection, there are all sorts of episodes to support that. And of course, selfishly, I'm promoting myself, but I'm going to tell you right now, in this presentation, after we're done, there are 12 more slides of podcasts that I listen to and highly recommend. So after we say goodbye, you will be able to then look at the episodes and the podcasts, which I feel are really worth checking out. If you want to student center your space because you've been tasked with this by your principal. Hey, we need to make this more student centered. Perhaps you're building a makerspace. How many times do I see that on Facebook? Help! I have to create a makerspace and I don't know what to do. Okay, well, good news. I've interviewed plenty of people who've done that, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Okay. And by the way, award winning, can I just say, episode 207, STEM librarian, that is this year's SLJ school librarian, Amanda Chacon. And not only does she do a fantastic job of giving us that, roadmap to creating an effective STEM program, but there's so many recommendations in her show notes. And Diana Rendina with episode 183, Makerspace and Library Space. Those are award winning programs. She's written a book on this, but we did an episode together. It was a lot of fun. So, moving right along, if you need help on advocating for yourself, there are a whole bunch of episodes, including Casey's episode 76, hashtag good trouble. All right, friends, in every show notes, you'll find the playlists. I've created these just because for many people, it's rather daunting to go through 281 episodes to find out what we're truly looking for. And so this is linked in the show notes. The playlists are also going to be linked in my last slide. I am sponsored by Capstone, and I'm going my third or fourth year of sponsorship. But if you use Capstone, $100 order, you can get $20 off. And by the way, my friends are like, so can I just order a bunch of $100 orders? I'm like, absolutely, get $20 off each time you spend $100. Use the code United. Absolutely. All right, friends, I do have a link tree. And again, I put a link in our conversation so that you can go ahead and get the entire presentation resources. But in here, you'll find the sponsorship as well as the playlists. You'll also see search by. So if you want to see how often your state has been featured on the show, search by state. You want to see how often your friends have been featured on the show, search by author. So it's a lot of fun. And then, friends, I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. I do want to go a little bit past this and show you some of the resources that are in the after this. I wanted to make sure to sort of fly through this and after this, you'll find a whole bunch of categories of podcasts. I've sort of grouped them into four groups. I love listening to podcasts about Gen Ed because when you change grade levels, listening to something from the high school when you've only got elementary and vice versa or middle school, those are really helpful. Ed tech is huge because it's constantly changing. Book reviews and author interviews, because when you are learning about, when you're doing your reader's advisory, when you're doing reader's advisory, the more you know about authors and the books they write, the better you are going to be at your reader's advisory. And that is especially the case like with me. I went 14 years elementary and then 13. I've done three. I'm going to be starting my fourth year in high school. So YA, I'm working on it. So library programming also, you're going to see a lot of podcasts that are dedicated to programming in our libraries. So I didn't link any of these. And somebody said, well, why didn't you link these? Well, there are over 100 different podcatchers out there. So I don't link these. All you would need to do is do a Google search or a search on your podcast app. Please know, and something worth mentioning, is that podcasts do go dormant. Many education ones, especially, go dormant in the summer. In the summer, it's not unusual for educators to take a break. And educators will take a break during the summer. And when they do, never fear, their content is still live in much the same way that you can still stream something on Netflix, even though it's not new, right? So I didn't link any of these podcasts because I don't know what you use to listen to podcasts, and it doesn't matter because if you're on your podcast app or if you're doing a Google search, all you have to do is search for these titles. If you throw in the author's name, that also would also narrow down your search. So I do include a whole lot of podcasts, and I will say there are some of these which have been off the air for a while, and that's okay because the content in many cases is still relevant. On this page, Kidlit Women, that was it has now been dormant for a while, but it's very powerful because it is done by Grace Lynn, and it's all about women in the role of book publishing, and it's incredible. I love listening to it. If you do want to get your students involved, these two offer opportunities for your students to get involved. Cannot say enough great things about Lauren Mobley. Lauren Mobley's been on the show, and she has her own show. All right, we've got Amanda Hunt, Rachel Fryman, also been on the show. Amanda Hunt's been on the show a bunch of times, and they have a show. Steve Tatro holds the record for being on the show the most. I think it's 7 times, but he has his own show, and that's fantastic. And then I do throw in some more. We've got some school library programming and then some public library perspectives, which is a lot of fun. So, friends, I can't tell you how much fun it has been to be a podcaster. I got to tell you, about half an hour ago, I finished recording an episode with Courtney Pentland, who is our now immediate past president for AASL. And that episode is going to come out actually on August 23rd. And it's going to be a fun conversation about what it's like to be the president of AASL. And I know incredibly eye opening for me. It was the third time we've recorded together. So a lot of fun. Anyway, I apologize. I have not been looking at the chat. um, I'm too busy talking. I'm sorry, everybody. But I will say one of the things in my resources is a FAQ, and it's not unusual. People are interested in being on the show. The FAQs, which are linked in my link tree and in my show notes every time a new episode comes out, the link tree, the FAQs will walk you through what it would be like to be a guest on the show. And I will say, I'm going to be completely honest, it's so much fun. We usually record at night with an adult beverage. And I got that idea from one of my guests because they had a drink and I was like, "Well, I'll join you." And then realized, that's something that we are so woefully lacking are social opportunities to just, do what our peers do, which is, "Hey, let's go and after work, does anybody else want to go out and get a drink?" And I'm not saying this is the only way we bond, but understand teachers do this all the time and think nothing of it. For us, if we want to get together with our, colleagues, our other librarians, again, there isn't one for miles where I live. So, I gotta tell you, a podcast is super low key. If you've ever presented for a group of people, that's what we do for a podcast. The difference is we just press record. Okay. Casey, I know I'm blabbing. Okay. And I don't want to take up anybody's time. I know you have to transition out. I do want to thank everybody for your time, and I hope you tune in. It would be great to include you in our listening audience.
And I want to say, Amy, the breakdown of the different um podcasts, that it's really fascinating. I'm going to go back through those because there were a couple that I had never seen before.
Well,
So
and again, some of them are dormant, but the content is still there.
yeah, content's still relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, content, and again, content is still there, or they've evolved, or they've done a spinoff. But for me, like when I think about the how I need to be supported, this is how I thought of breaking that down. And again, obviously, there are lots of great podcasts that people listen to just for fun. True crime.
Mhm.
It's not going to help me in my Oh, I'm going to take that back. I'm going to be doing a true crime episode on how to teach it in our libraries. That's another thing we'll talk about this fall. So, but Casey, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. I always learn something new every time you present. I always enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Well, whew, that was good, wasn't it? All right.